That plane over there is a relatively new Airbus A320neo. The plane itself, the wings, the cockpit, the seats, the TV screens, can lease for about $400,000 in today's market. But the engines, just the pair of engines themselves, can cost as much or more than the entire plane itself. The price of plane engines in today's market is completely off the rails. Remember that Spirit filed for bankruptcy last year? When they did, analysts were absolutely sure that they were just going to tear down their planes and sell them for parts because the engines are worth so much. And then there's Canada's Air Transat. They sold a lot of 4 engines for $85 million to then go and lease them back from the buyer. There's been a perfect storm brewing, one that's not just turning planes into scrap, but one that us consumers might end up paying for. So the first thing that we need to understand is that today, about 40% of the planes flying in the US are leased rather than owned by the airline that's painted on their tail. Now, in the US before the 70s, it was pretty normal for airlines to just buy all of their fleet outright. These were simpler times for aviation. Many airline routes were subsidized by the government, so airlines didn't really need to be that profitable. This system came with its own set of problems: high fees, barriers to competition. So in the 1970s, Congress started this effort.
An effort that culminated, of course, in the passage of the Airline Deregulation Act of 1978.
Now, deregulation ended subsidies and some federal controls over routes and costs, which meant that airlines had to tighten their belts. And you can actually see the belt tightening in this chart. This is the percentage of leased planes in commercial fleets. Leasing makes the astronomical cost of keeping these planes available to the airlines just a bit more bearable, or at least in the short term. That means that now we have these leasing companies that own the planes and lease them to the airlines, kind of like a car rental. And they are absolutely key to our story. Now, in the US, airlines have been able to shift back slightly into owning the planes that they fly in the 21st century. And they're gonna be important soon, so keep that in mind. Now, whether you own or lease your plane, you still need to maintain it. For example, every 400 to 600 flight hours, planes need to go through an A check. That's usually like an overnight service at the hangar. You also have more thorough C checks. That's every 18 to 24 months. And then D checks every 6 to 10 years. Now, this alphabet checks, they cover routine engine inspections and maintenance, but full engine overhauls, they're another beast entirely. Somewhere between 15,000 and 30,000 flight hours, engines must be disassembled, cleaned, inspected for wear, repaired or replaced, and reassembled to meet these certified standards. And it's crucial for airlines to get as many flight hours out of an engine as possible because this is a really big job. Now, before COVID, the engine overhaul process took about 140 days wing to wing. That's from the moment that the engine comes off the plane to the moment it comes back after going to the shop. But within a few years, that number has more than doubled to up to 360 days for newer engines, depending on who you ask. Now, regardless of that, that's close to a year. It's a year of a plane just parked, engineless, waiting. And much of that delay is due to one particular engine. Now, the crazy part is that airlines kind of knew that this was going to happen. They knew about this back in 2023. They could have anticipated and done something about it so that it wouldn't be a problem in 2026, and didn't manage to do it. Now, most people will see that as a failure, but as an entrepreneur, you should kind of see it as a massive gap in the market. To help you spot these gaps before anybody else, our team has built the HustleNomics Highlights database. I actually went through this document, and it's not just a report, it's really a breakdown of high margin industries and the specific economic levers that you can pull to start a business in those industries right now. Now, it shows you exactly where the money is moving while everybody else is just looking at the headlines. The report is completely free. You can click the link in the description or just snatch this QR code here to get the full breakdown. It'll take you about 5 minutes to read, but it'll change how you look at every industry we talk about on this channel. Okay, now let's get back to that engine. This one particular engine is the first of 3 critical problems that turned 2026 into basically the perfect storm for aviation. This is the Pratt & Whitney PW1000 Gulf, also known as the Pratt & Whitney GTF. In many aspects, this was an engineering marvel. 75% less noise, up to 20% lower fuel burn, incredibly fuel efficient. So even though airlines had other engine choices, a good chunk of the orders for the new Airbus A320neo family of planes came with this promising new GTF engine. Now, Pratt & Whitney found an issue with powder metal. That's one of the materials that was used in the high pressure turbine section of the engine. It's kind of like the end tail of it. And this issue could cause cracks and could cause the engine to fail. And so they announced that all 3,000 engines in the A320neo family would need to be recalled. They predicted that by 2026, there'd be 350 planes on the ground every day of the year. Now, a couple of YouTube channels have called this the engine that kills airlines because having to ground half of your fleet can be devastating for an airline. And this issue in particular has already killed at least one. And to add fuel to the fire, or maybe water to the storm, we have a second problem, which is supply chain issues. They have caused delays for everybody, including not just Pratt & Whitney, but airplane manufacturers as well. Airbus alone has more than 8,700 planes on back order as of 2025. That's around a decade of plane production. Airlines can't just swap in new jets, so they're stuck flying these older planes. The average age of planes in the air right now is almost 15 years old. It's a record high. And these may be planes that are maybe at the end of these maintenance cycles or that simply require more frequent maintenance because they're older. But maintenance is also strained by the lack of parts. According to Bain & Company, demand for repair parts is outpacing supply by up to 20%. All of this stuff loops back to the repair shops. They have more engines to service and they have to keep them there for longer. The strain is so bad that CFM, which is the other company that manufactures engines for the A320neo family, they started creating and delivering these durability kits that keep their engines out of the shop longer to try and put an ease on this strain. Now, I don't think I mind these durability kits, to be honest, but our story editors, they felt it was kind of sus. I don't know what you guys think. Well, lo and behold, a solution to all of these problems. Instead of having a plane parked for a year, which would literally be over $3 million in leasing costs, well, what if you just swap the engine for a spare? You get the plane back in the air in a fraction of the time, you cut the losses somewhat, while the other engine is in the shop. Now, that idea isn't new, but it became crucial for airlines to survive this crunch. The problem is, well, where do you get fresh engines? You probably don't want to buy them, especially if they cost tens of millions of dollars. Most airlines are already cash constrained, so, well, what if you lease them from those leasing companies we talked about? Now, the logic is very simple. In the example I gave you earlier, leasing an entire plane costs $400,000. The engines, separate from the plane, are leased for also $400,000. You don't need to do a lot of math to see the benefit for the leasing companies. They can just lease out engines and make the same amount of money as owning a whole plane. Now, there are other efforts to untangle this mess, and some have turned into really good businesses. For example, Delta, which has a large fleet of planes that they own, not lease, was in a great position to launch this new business model, which is a repair shop for other airlines. Because Delta owns this abnormally large portion of their fleet, they've gained a lot of experience in maintaining planes and engines in-house. And this year, they carved this tech ops division in their financial reports. And this division generated about $826 million in revenue in 2025, and they're forecasting it's going to grow to $3 billion in the next few years. Now, I mentioned Air Transat before. Now, these guys figured out that it was better to sell the engines to a lessor, in this case, Rolls-Royce and Partners Finance, collect those $85 million or so in liquid cash, and then lease those same engines back to keep them in their fleet. So for cash-constrained airlines, this model can keep them out of a tight spot, which is why analysts assumed that Spirit was going to do the same thing when it filed for bankruptcy. They are looking for court approval to auction them as we speak. Now, Bain & Company expects that this year will be the peak of this repair backlog, but because of how massive these supply chains and industries are, they only expect this issue to start untangling itself by the end of the decade. All the while, issues with the GTF continue to pile up. Just as I was researching this video, this is early 2026, the FAA issued another order for 586 of these engines to go through a round of fixes after reported fan blade breaks and fires. But more than your engine catching fire, which, I mean, let's be real, it's very, very unlikely. The biggest concern for us flyers is how much money airlines are gonna have to shed over the next few months and years to survive with so many of their planes on the ground, and how much that's gonna cost us. Now, we're already seeing some big moves in the leasing industry. There's a lot of money needed to make these sale and leaseback transactions, and there have been some large acquisitions by private equity. And we know that private equity usually doesn't transfer into good news for us consumers. And yes, what I am basically saying is there's a good chance we're gonna have to pay higher ticket prices over the next few months and years, or like they like to do in these days, just put extra charges on everything. Now, I am half kidding on this one, but if you know how to overhaul plane engines or you manufacture engine parts, well, now is an amazing time to get into this business. For the rest of us, you can get some ideas from the HustleNomics guide. And if you want to nerd even deeper on this, you should check my deep dive on how that plane leasing industry actually works. Catch you on the next one.